The road stretched endlessly ahead, a dark ribbon of asphalt weaving through an ocean of emptiness. Under the cloak of night, it seemed alive, breathing in sync with the restless wind that whispered through the surrounding landscape. The moon hung low, shrouded by a thin veil of clouds, casting eerie shadows that danced and twisted, making even the most mundane shapes appear sinister. For Aaron and Mark, it was supposed to be just another leg of their adventure, a journey meant to rekindle their connection, to reignite a sense of discovery. But from the moment they crossed onto that forgotten stretch of road, something felt wrong. It wasn't the isolation. They had driven lonely roads before. It wasn't even the oppressive silence that wrapped around them, broken only by the hum of the car engine. It was something deeper, something primal, an unease that crept into the marrow of their bones, whispering that they didn't belong here. Aaron tried to shake it off, focusing instead on the soothing rhythm of the tires against the road. Mark, however, couldn't ignore the feeling. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror, as though expecting to see something or someone following them. The first sign came in the form of a flickering light on the horizon. At first, they thought it was another car. Relief washed over them at the idea of sharing the road with someone else, no matter how fleeting. But as they got closer, the light remained stationary, suspended in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't a car. It was something else entirely. When they finally reached the source of the light, they saw an old gas station, its neon sign glowing weakly, almost reluctantly. The place was a relic of a bygone era, standing defiant against time, its edges softened by decay and neglect. Something about it felt misplaced, as if it existed outside the natural flow of things. The windows were dark, yet Aaron felt eyes on her, a piercing gaze that followed her every move. Neither of them wanted to stop, but the road ahead was a void, swallowed by an encroaching mist that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Their instincts screamed to turn around, but there was no going back. The road behind them was gone, replaced by an endless expanse of gray nothingness. Route 66 has always been more than a highway. Dubbed the Mother Road, it weaves through American history, connecting cities, small towns, and dreams. But along its quiet Oklahoma stretch, past forgotten gas stations and derelict motels, lies a darker legend that locals rarely speak of, the Highway of Horror. It was said that on stormy nights, when the air was thick and time seemed to stand still, travelers would encounter strange apparitions, vanish without explanation, or be lured into the clutches of something ancient and malevolent. Aaron and Mark, an adventurous couple on a cross-country road trip, had no idea they were about to become part of that legend. Aaron loved road trips. To her, they symbolized freedom, the ability to drive away from life's stresses and explore the unknown. Mark, her husband of 5 years, wasn't as enthusiastic. He preferred the predictability of airplanes and hotels over back roads and questionable models. But Aaron had convinced him that a trip along Route 66 would rekindle their sense of adventure and, perhaps, their strained relationship. Their journey had been pleasant enough until they reached Oklahoma. The sky had grown heavy with dark clouds, and the radio forecast warned of storms ahead. Still, Aaron insisted they press on. "We'll find a motel when the rain starts," she said, gripping the wheel with determination. As they drove deeper into the countryside, the charm of Route 66 began to wane. The road was lined with skeletal remains of businesses, boarded-up diners, collapsed barns, and motels with broken windows staring out like hollow eyes. It was as if the land had been abandoned, left to be reclaimed by time. Rain began to fall in thick sheets, turning the road into a blur of gray and black. Their GPS lost signal, and the headlights seemed to reflect more off the rain than illuminate the road ahead. As they argued over whether to stop or keep going, they spotted a dim light flickering in the distance. It was an old gas station, its neon sign barely legible. Mark squinted and read aloud, "Garrity's Gas Rest." The place looked like it hadn't been touched since the 1950s. Aaron pulled in, parking under the canopy as the rain continued to pound the roof. Inside, the station was eerily quiet. Rows of dusty candy bars and faded postcards sat untouched on the shelves. Behind the counter stood a man who seemed out of place in time. His uniform was clean but outdated, and his face was thin and pale, with eyes that didn't quite match his faint smile. "Rough night for traveling," he rasped, his voice carrying a strange echo. Aaron asked about motels or rest stops nearby, and the man's expression darkened. "Not much around here. Best keep to the road. And don't stray." Something about his words, or perhaps the way he said them, sent a shiver down Erin's spine. Mark was impatient, eager to leave, but Erin hesitated. She glanced at the postcards on the counter. The images depicted Route 66 landmarks, including Garrity's gas rest, but they looked wrong. The station in the pictures appeared brighter, livelier. And then she noticed the dates. They were all from the 1950s. As they drove away, the fog descended like a curtain, swallowing the world around them. The road became an endless gray tunnel, the rain muffled by the oppressive mist. Then came the whispers, soft at first, like wind passing through cracks in an old house. But soon they grew louder, more distinct. "Turn back," a voice murmured. But when Erin looked at Mark, he shook his head. He hadn't heard anything. Then came the laughter. It started as a low chuckle, distant but menacing, before building into a cacophony of voices, each layered with malice. Erin gripped the wheel tighter, her knuckles white. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mark nodded this time. Out of the fog, a figure appeared. It was a woman in a torn dress, standing in the middle of the road. Her hair was matted, and her face was obscured by shadows. Mark yelled for Erin to stop, and she slammed the brakes, but the car skidded to a halt just inches from the figure. When they looked again, she was gone. From that point on, the journey became a nightmare. Shadowy figures appeared along the roadside, their faces twisted in expressions of pain or fury. One was a man in a fedora, his body flickering like a poorly tuned television. Another was a child clutching a doll, her eyes hollow and unblinking. Every so often, Erin would glance at the rearview mirror and see something or someone sitting in the back seat. Each time she turned around, there was nothing there. Mark's knuckles were white as he gripped his seat, unable to tear his gaze from the swirling fog outside. "Keep driving," he muttered, almost to himself. "Just keep driving." When another gas station appeared, identical to the first, Erin and Mark were too desperate to question it. They pulled in, hoping for answers or at the very least a reprieve from the horrors. Inside, the attendant was the same man they'd met earlier, down to his greasy uniform and unsettling smile. "You didn't listen," he said simply, shaking his head. "You looked back." "What do you mean?" Erin demanded, her voice breaking. But the man didn't answer. Instead, he handed her a postcard. On it was an image of their car parked outside the gas station, shrouded in fog. Terrified, they fled the station and sped down the highway, but the road twisted unnaturally, looping back on itself. Landmarks they had passed hours ago reappeared, but they were decayed and covered in vines, as if decades had passed in moments. The fog thickened until it felt like they were driving through a tunnel of gray. Shapes began pressing against the windows' faces with hollow eyes and gaping mouths, their hands clawing at the glass. The whispers turned to screams, each voice demanding something they couldn't understand. Suddenly, the car stalled. No matter how much Mark turned the key, the engine wouldn't start. Erin's phone was dead, and the fog seemed to close in, suffocating them. A shadow emerged in front of the car, slowly taking the shape of the woman they'd seen earlier. This time, her face was visible. It was rotted and skeletal, her mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. "You shouldn't have looked back," she whispered. When the storm cleared the next morning, a passing trucker found the car sitting on the side of the road. The interior was empty, the doors ajar. The only sign of Erin and Mark was a postcard lying on the dashboard. It showed an old gas station shrouded in fog, with two faint figures standing in the doorway. To this day, travelers along Route 66 speak of the Highway of Horror. They say that on stormy nights, if you're not careful, you might find yourself trapped there too, just another ghost wandering the misty road, forever lost. And the rules: stay on the road, never stop at the gas stations, and above all, don't look back. The road behind them had vanished, swallowed by the same mist that now encased their world. Erin and Mark had driven into something they couldn't comprehend, a place where reality twisted, where time and space had no meaning. The whispers, the shadows, and the figures they had seen weren't mere tricks of the mind. They were warnings. Warnings they hadn't understood until it was far too late. As the fog pressed closer, as the final light of hope dimmed, one thing became clear: this was no ordinary road. It was a passage, a place where the lost remain lost and the past refuses to die. For those who wander too far or stay too long, escape is a fading dream, and the highway becomes their eternal prison. If you enjoyed this chilling tale and want more stories that send shivers down your spine, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another journey into the unknown. Who knows? The next road we travel might lead us straight to your darkest fears.